Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr.
Thank you,
Carson.
Chair and fellow Hoosier and friend. This question is for Mr. Regan. I was very pleased to see your written testimony note that over a year ago, the FAA announced that they were starting the implementation of secondary cockpit barriers on new passenger aircraft. This is the requirement, as you know, sir, that I authored in the FAA Reauthorization Act in 2018. Labor groups have been some of the strongest advocates for these safety devices to keep the flight deck secure and to keep crew and passengers safe. Yet, implementation has been painfully slow. In fact, some suggest deliberately delayed by the industry. What is your assessment, sir, of implementation progress so far? And can you give us an idea of the percentage of implementation at this point? And what can our committee do to basically speed things up and get secondary cockpit barriers installed on all new aircraft?
Thank you for the question. There, you're right. This has been way too slow on the implementation of the secondary barrier requirements. I mean, we're talking about the very last of the 9/11 Commission report requirements to be implemented by Congress. And yet, when we passed that law in 2018, despite the very clear language about any newly manufactured aircraft should be equipped with secondary barriers, there was a whole bunch of hemming and hawing over what is a newly manufactured aircraft. Is it a new model? Is it just literally something coming off the line? I thought Congress was pretty clear. It's every newly manufactured aircraft. It doesn't matter if it's a new model. That should be implemented fully. And furthermore, I mean, the standard should be extended also to cargo aircraft as well, which is also a threat in that regard. I can't give you an exact percentage in terms of the amount that's been done, but I do think in terms of retrofitting and the work that was done in this legislation will strengthen that federal requirement. But I do think it's incumbent upon Congress to hold them accountable to actually see through the letter of the law in terms of why this critical security measure is necessary.
Thank you, sir. And this question is for everyone, this follow-up question. When air traffic controllers, safety inspectors, and transportation workers, we all know, perform amazing jobs. Often so in very challenging circumstances, in the towers, on the ground, and certainly in flight. So first, I want to say thank you for your hard work and keeping our American skies the safest in the world, quite frankly, the best in the world. What are the most important provisions in the FAA bill, in your mind, that will be the most helpful to these workers and to keep our flights running very safely and on time? And lastly, is there one thing that's not in our bill that you believe should have been included?
All right, I'll go ahead and start. From the airport perspective, the increase in funding in AIP, it allows us to increase critical infrastructure, it allows us to address safety issues at the airports, whether it be runway incursion and construction, right? Whether it's any other kind of surface transportation, any kind of other surface infrastructure development. So having that additional funding for us is what we see as making the airport environment more safe.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's getting a BVLOS rule out and published and sort of enacted to help sort of advance the integration of new entrants into the airspace and provide a framework from which we can keep growing.
I think, Mr. Carson, from my perspective, on a lot of the advisory committees that actually look at the NASAs, not only in this reauthorization, but in previous ones, there's been an ask from the Congress to give us a plan of how to optimize the facilities and take a close look at it. Of course, the fear is that any time that the FAA or DOT would come forward, don't do it in my district, don't do it in my state. And so there isn't really a mechanism by which the executive branch can actually try to execute and think they could ever get it through the legislative branch. And so if I would say anything, it is that we all work together to figure out in this modern day of telecommunications, how many real centers do we need? How many TRACONs? Where can we spend the money? But also, where can we build the one of this century, wherever it is, to say, let's capture the way we now communicate digitally and be able then to say, okay, based on that, how many do we really need and how many TRACONs? And I think that would help the FAA and DOT actually provide a plan forward.
Well, first of all, in terms of things that need to be implemented, I mean, the drug and alcohol testing for foreign repair station workers, I mean, that's an issue. Oversight of foreign repair stations, something I've been working on for the entirety of my 13 years at TTD. It would be nice to be able to move that off the list if we get a good, solid final rule that enhances the safety of our system. But we also need to have a federal workforce, including controllers and safety inspectors, that meet the growing demands of our system. So meeting our minimum hiring standards, the newly minted hiring standards for controllers is a really important priority, and one that will actually improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our national system. In terms of things that were not included that I would have liked to include, stronger standards for the contract workers. You know, we are an industry that prides itself on being a bastion of middle-class jobs, whether you're, you know, if you're a pilot or a flight attendant or a controller or a ramp worker and you're protected by a union, you're going to be able to make a real, you know, raise a family and have a solid job that way. The workers that often get forgotten are those who are subcontracted out, whether it be the people making the food that's served on board aircraft, or the people cleaning the airports, or whether it be the people doing ADA compliance. Those workers need to have a higher standard for how they're performing in the industry, and an industry that rightfully prides itself on providing middle-class jobs.
Thank you. I'll yield back, Chairman.